Hi guys, this is part 2. Last time we talked about the solar console and we talked about sort of who's represented on it and what kind of beings are involved. Today I want to talk about how it actually works and what's the purpose. Okay, so watch this video and you'll see. Alright, so the solar console is a location, but it's also more of a consciousness sharing place. So when people think of a console, they think of like physical people coming together in a, physical space and having, boardroom with a round table and chatting about something, taking notes. It's not quite like that. There is a component like that as well for the third dimensional beings, and there are that are using physical body as the anchor point, and a lot actually prefer that, even if they're 4 and 5 dimensional beings. But beings that are of a higher frequency, they don't do that. So I usually access the solar console from the non-body, non-form perspective. Like, I don't physically get on a spaceship and fly into some sort of a boardroom. Just so you know. My life is interesting, but not that interesting. So what I end up doing is tuning in to the particular frequency, which is like a broadcast, but you have to have a code to be able to have access. There are plenty of beings that can tune in because they have the range, but they would get sort of the generic version. And then there's more of the actual meetings and participation. So my bigger me that I'm connected to is part of that, which is why this me, Eugenia me, the personality in the human body, gets access to that as well. So I get the information. But you actually have to be part of the console to participate. Otherwise, you can view certain information, but you can't really do something in it. But every person, anywhere, may it be human or not human, can add something, frequency-wise, into it. Sort of like we each can add little bits, and then all those pieces of energy information are reviewed. And depending on, what's required, some action can be taken on them. So the same happens, let's say, if a lot of people pray for something. That energy is like a package gets delivered into that particular location of the vibratory range of the solar console, and then they review what that is. And if this is something that they believe should be amplified, because it fits in, with the universal view or the developmental stages of this system, then they could amplify it or not. Either way, a prayer works because it has the imprint in the law of attraction and resonance, so that's sort of a thing in itself. But solar console can also do something with that frequency if it decides to. And for that, there has to be a particular resonance. The same works for individual people as well. Somebody can make a statement or consciously choose to connect to the solar console and imprint something, and it will be reviewed one way or another, but depending on importance and depending how it actually applies to the entire system of what solar console deals with, it will be either amplified or put in a different category. So there is all sorts of a sorting process that happens with all the data that comes into the solar console frequency range from everywhere inside this solar system. The solar console resides, you can say, or meets in the sun. Now, sun is an entity. It actually has all sorts of creative consciousness. It propagates the solar system with itself, the waves that come off it into the solar system, which then creates the world that we live in. It's essentially a giant simulation that lives there, created by the being that is our star, the sun. So within it, there is also a pocket of energy that is created that is outside of linear space and time. So we can't really say it's inside the sun because it's outside of space, and that would be giving a location to it. But it's generally connected to the sun, so I like to think of it as inside the sun, even though I'm sure it's not actually floating inside our star. That is a spheroid bubble of energy where all those entities can bring their conscious awareness. And the intelligence of that group is what solar console is. So, as I said, there are beings that are on the console, then there are beings who can add something to it, to its agenda, bring it up, by, being pretty much broadcasting out into space when we resonate something that we want to change within our system. It's usually not quite as personal within each person's life, but something that vibrates for the bigger scenario, like help the planet or humankind or particular group of people to shift out of certain negative morphogenic field of being controlled, let's say, into being free. Solar Council will take notice of that and probably amplify that. So the way that my perception of the meetings, it looks like a spheroid space with a lot of consciousnesses that don't really have forms. When somebody speaks or delivers a particular message, that being takes form. That form is in the center of the spheroid, and it usually has whatever representation that being chooses to show. It could be a glowing orb, it could be an angel, it could be a feline being, it could be a reptilian being, it could be whatever form that they choose, which I guess could be their form or not, if they're conscious enough that they could project any form, but usually they would pick whatever form that they find represents them the most. And the energy of it, geometry, colors, vibration, will change depending what the being is saying. So describing it linearly is very hard because it doesn't actually look linear. It's not in a third dimension, so because of the third dimensional tools of explanation here don't apply. It's a multi-dimensional space, so it's sort of like the Escher painting when you're walking on the stairs this way, but you end up coming out the other way. So it doesn't quite make sense in a literal way. But if you want to imagine it, it would be like a sphere with lots of consciousnesses all around it from the inside and then resonating in, and whoever is the main speaker at that moment shows up in the middle and then resonates out to everybody involved. This is how communication happens. And then there's a resonance back of sort of yes or no in general, like yes, we agree or we don't agree, and if not, somebody else might come in and say something that they believe is, important or something like that. So there's always a way of this back and forth. It's not a ruling body. Solar Council doesn't rule anything. It's not even quite correct to say guide, because they don't really guide. They support in accordance with the universal law. And we have on this planet gone so far from the universal law because of all sorts of negative entities that participated here and created the entropic system instead of a syntropic that we were originally set out with. And then the human, soul group chose to accommodate that, chose to go that way. Because of that, nobody could interfere from the outside and sort of like rescue humans from this control system, because they are the ones who agreed to go on that detour. So this is why so many starseeds came here, to try to help human beings to choose a different thing, not to rescue them. Nobody needs rescuing. Nobody is somehow trapped and can't get out. Every human being has consciousness access and can wake up and actually be their own authority and shift anything that they are controlled by. Just like that, because they have light codes inside them. But, not all humans choose, because it's hard, because it takes a lot of effort, because you have to love yourself to do it. You have to feel self-worth. You have to be able to be present to your own life and see yourself as the focal point instead of look outside and who says what about you and that kind of thing. So it's hard, and human beings right now are learning that. So Solar Council is supporting, including this experiment on this planet with the current conditions, but also many other ones that exist here. There's a big organization of beings on a third dimension that communicate and ferry back and forth all sorts of cargo. Some of it is life, unfortunately. Some of it is just technology. There are civilizations that used to be on this planet and then moved off this planet because they advanced. Like there's civilization from South America that small group of them actually was able to shift up in frequencies with Kachina that were participating at that time. And when that happened, some part of them chose to remain here and became the ascended masters of Naakal mystery schools in Lemuria, and some chose not to, so they shifted off-world. So that civilization actually progressed off-world, and they now have technology, and they look like Mayan people or something like that. I mean, they actually look very much like human beings of that type. and they just on a completely different level of technology and consciousness than we are. So they also live here within the solar system, and they also have place elsewhere where they live. And there are other ones like that. Then there are Hathors, the beings that in the Venus, they used to be in a 4D, now they progressed in a 5D, and so on. So all those beings, they each have their own different experiment, and those experiments are running, and Solar Council is participating with all of that, making sure that there's actually sort of all congruent to degree that it's possible, and slowly working on cleaning out the negative interferences from that as to bring this entire solar system back to the syntropic system. So there you have it. In the next video, I will tell you what that looks like for human beings, how that resonance, how that influence happens here with us. Be love. Be free. Be God.